Hello, brothers. I wanted to make another short video because as I was grading your assignments, and as I mentioned in the last video, I've finished grading all the assignments that have been turned in. But as I was grading your assignments for Module 4, I noticed a couple of things from the assignment called prophetic analysis. Um, I noticed on that assignment there might be a little bit of confusion about what to do for that. So I wanted to just do a short video discussing that assignment and also assignment, the prophetic analysis assignment for Zechariah is assignment 4.10. And for Revelation, it's assignment 4.18. But essentially, they're the same assignment, just for the different passages. But I wanted to take a moment, just go through a couple of things on that assignment and hopefully clarify what you need to do for that particular assignment. So let me pull it up. It's assignment 4.10 here on this is the prophetic passage analysis for your assigned Zechariah passage. And again, it'll be the same kind of thing for your Revelation text. But first, let me point out, it might be helpful for you to go back and look at the videos from sessions 11 to 14 that talk about these steps for this particular analysis. Also, check your syllabus from the workshop that we did. I went through this for Haggai as an exercise as well. And I'll show you that in a moment. But for this analysis, there are 6 steps again. And the first step is the one that I think has maybe the most confusion. In that step, I ask you to perform a narrative or poetic analysis on the passage, depending on what kind of genre it is. And what I've noticed for that is some of the passages, some of the prophetic texts will be poetic in nature, and some have narrative features. For example, the passages in Zechariah and Revelation actually are more narrative-like in their characteristics. For example, when we look at and consider the Zechariah text, those passages are all visions. So you will have a passage from Zechariah 1 through 6 that is a vision. And that vision is given sort of with a narrative style, right? There will be a dialogue between the angel and Zechariah. There's a narrator, Zechariah, who's giving a description of things. And so the passage will have the features and characteristics of a narrative, just like in Revelation. There are many characteristics of a narrative there, with John narrating certain parts of it, dialogue within them, scenes. But there's one thing I want to make sure is clear, and these prophetic and the prophetic passages in Zechariah and Revelation, they are not narratives in the full sense that they are a story with a plot. There is the author has a purpose in presenting these particular passages, and they are connected together in some way. Zechariah's visions are all connected. There is a flow of thought, but Zechariah is not telling a story. He's presenting these visions, and in the course of presenting them, he describes not only what the vision is, but also he tells us the meaning of the vision. Usually it's the angel providing the interpretation. And so when you're doing this first step, step 1, what I want you to do is just identify maybe the setting and the scenes. You can note the characters is fine, but there's not a story with a plot to it that's being told in these particular verses. All right, so you don't need to go through the full narrative analysis with the plot and all of that. Now, there are some prophetic books where there is a full story and narrative. Isaiah 36 to 38 would be one example of that. But in your particular passage in Zechariah 1 through 6, you will have just a vision being described. So just all you need to do there is note who the characters are, if there are different scenes within it, and then narrate or comment. So this will be sort of a more of a summary approach to some of the narrative features, all right? But you don't have to do the full narrative analysis. Now, in some of the cases, you will see some poetic devices used within the passage, so you will also need to identify those as well, okay? So again, in step one, for your Zechariah passage and also your Revelation passage, you will have narrative features, things that we see in narratives, but it's not a complete narrative, a full story. So you don't have to do the full analysis. Just identify the setting, the situation of the particular vision, and then there might be scenes, there might be one or two scenes within the vision. Also, you can note the characters and the narrator comments and some of those things. So just point out some of the key narrative features. And then if you see poetic features, incorporate those as well, as far as the figurative language, things like that. Now, the second step just indicates, you just need to state if the passage overall is past, present, or future. Okay? There may be parts in the passage that are maybe present or something, but just note the overall passage. So for the visions, for example, the vision part is going to be speaking of a future event. All right. So just note that for the prophetic genre, again, is the whole passage judgment, oracle, or salvation, or apocalyptic? All right. Don't look at it verse by verse necessarily, but just is the thrust of the passage that way. And then step 4. I noticed some of you were also looking for figurative language here. Now, you'll do that in step 1. If you see figurative language, that's a poetic device that you want to note in the first step. In the fourth step, what is different here is looking for symbols. Now, symbols are figurative in the sense that perhaps the intended meaning or the symbol itself represents something else, but the symbol is an intentional feature from the prophet who is identifying something that by the symbol, so that the symbol represents something else. It's meant to point to something else. So, for example, in Zechariah 3, it describes the fine linens of Joshua. Well, that represents something in that vision, because the vision tells us that those fine linens represent forgiveness of Joshua being cleansed. And so symbols are a picture, they're an object that is meant to refer to something else. All right, when we say something symbolic, we mean that object represents something else. Like, for example, if a person holding up their fist, we might say that's symbolic for wanting to fight or defending, wanting to fight back or defend himself. All right. Now, he could be in a literal fight, but if someone just puts their fist up like this, or you remember President Duterte, right? He had the fist. That meant something. It symbolized something else. All right. And so in the same way, in these visions in Zechariah and Revelation, there will be objects in the vision that may symbolize or represent something else. For example, in the book of Daniel, in Daniel chapter 8, it describes these otherworldly creatures. Well, those creatures were meant to represent other nations. And it explains that in the passage. All right. And often that is the case with symbols. There will be, for example, in Zechariah 4, there's the olive trees and the conduits going down to the candle stick that is there, and these are symbols of something else. All right. So for step 4, all I want you to do is identify the symbols. Don't identify all figurative language. That's something you do in step 1. Here you're looking specifically for objects within the vision that are intended to represent something else. Okay? So what is the symbol and what does it refer to? That's what you're looking for. All right? Then in step 5, you're just identifying how your passage is connected to the passage before it and to the passage after it. So if you're looking at Zechariah chapter 4 and that vision of the olive trees and the those things that are there, how does that vision connect to Zechariah 3? How does it connect to Zechariah 5? That's what that step is intended. And then the final step, step 6, is how is this passage cited, quoted elsewhere in Scripture, or is it alluded to? How's the author using the passage in that context? So that's what you're going to be just looking for, is that passage. I don't mean is there a cross-reference that talks about something similar, but is that specific passage being referenced or alluded to somewhere else? All right, another part of Scripture. Now, let me just show you the example from Haggai that we did in class, and you have your syllabus. You can look through that. But this is step 4, the passage prophetic analysis for Haggai 2. And for Haggai, as I mentioned here, first you do the observations, and then we perform the narrative, poetic analysis or narrative analysis. This is step 1. And notice I said Haggai has some narrative features, but is not a narrative. So there are setting and there are scenes. And then you'd want to also note what are some of the comments that the narrator made. And then I mentioned Haggai has poetic features, but is not a poem. And then this is where I just describe some of those poetic features. Notice a merism, repetition, synecdoche, things like that. So in this first step, you're just identifying the elements there. You don't have to go into a full-blown analysis, but just if there's poetic features, identify those. If there's narrative features, identify those. All right. And then the time frame. Notice in Haggai, in this particular passage, Haggai 2 verses 1 to 10, the time frame of the first half of the passage is present tense. It's foretelling. The second half of the passage is future tense. It's foretelling. So I just broke it up in that way. The type of prophetic genre, again, the prophetic part is in verses 6 to 10 in that passage. And judgment is mentioned there, but the focus is a salvation oracle with his promise regarding his people. Now in step 4, again, identify what is symbolic language. Notice here I didn't indicate any figurative language. That is what I talked about in the first step. All right. In this step, I just look for, is there anything here that looks symbolic? And in this particular passage, there was not. I mentioned a couple of other places at the end of Haggai. Zerubbabel was described as a signet ring. And so clearly he's literally not a signet ring, but that's a symbol. That's a symbol intended to communicate something about Zerubbabel that God wanted to communicate. All right. So a symbol, again, is unique. It's a unique type of figurative language that you want to point out. Then I just describe how this passage connects to chapter 1 that came before it, and then the third message that came after it. And then in Haggai's case, I will shake the nations was actually referred to and quoted in a couple of other passages, or alluded to in a couple of passages, and then directly quoted in Hebrews 12. Okay, so all this to say, go back and review the syllabus from the workshop before you do assignment 4.10, and note there the example. And also I gave you an example in assignment 4.10 from Obadiah. You'll have an example there, and I'll just show it to you real quick. I give it to you in the document that you upload. So this just shows for Obadiah, there were no narrative features. It was simply a sermon spoken in with poetic language. And here are the poetic devices used by Obadiah. And then step 2 was the time frame, and in Obadiah is primarily future. So that's what I noted here. Future in verses 1 to 9 and 15 to 21, and then it focuses on past events in 10 to 14. Okay, so you can look at that in detail, but again, just carefully examine those things. And for these assignments, look carefully at the example I give you. Most of you are doing that, but some of you are turning in an assignment and it doesn't look like you're following the example that I gave to you. So make sure to do that, all right? And then lastly, and I'm sorry this video went a little longer than I intended, but lastly, some of you have been turning in your assignments from a Mac, and that format cannot be read by Canvas. So I need you to convert your Mac file to a .word or .pdf file, okay? So this will be the case for everybody. When you submit or upload your assignments onto Canvas, upload them as a Word file or as a PDF file, all right? So that then the Canvas can read it, and then therefore I can read it and be able to give you feedback. So please take note of that. So again, I have graded every assignment that has been turned in, and I'll keep looking, but I want to encourage you, continue to work on your assignments. And then for this video, I wanted to point out specific issues with the prophetic analysis assignments, because I did notice there seemed to be some confusion. You are welcome again to contact me if you have any questions about this assignment or any other or anything regarding the class. Just message me. And if you want to do FaceTime or Zoom, we can do that if that would help. All right. So continuing to pray for you, brothers, and looking forward to seeing you again on October 10th as we start Module 5. And just want to continue to encourage you to keep working on those assignments, set time aside each week and work through them, and be ready to preach your passages from Zechariah and Revelation when we gather together on October 10th. God bless you, brothers, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.